are 4 presentations of the first cohort of the first ICTD program in the States. And I'm actually so much more excited about this than even your graduation, your papers and everything, because at graduation, we're not going to hear from you, right? I mean, you're going to go up and you're going to get a thing and look cute in your medieval garb. But this is really your chance to, I'm just so excited. It's your chance to shine and talk about your practicums. For those of you that don't know about the program specifics, the practicum is a semester-long field project that culminates their entire academic process. And we do this, they do a paper in addition to this presentation. Oh, sorry. Okay. We're going to go in the order of Nicole, and then Kevin, and Alexandra, and Matt. I'm going to let them tell you about their projects because I know we're already starting kind of late. They'll do a quick intro in their projects. We're going for exactly 20 minutes per person. I will cut you guys off if it's not 20 minutes. And we'll do 5 minutes of Q&A, and then if you want to take, well, I may ask for some questions to go offline later on, and that's why we have lots of caffeine and sugar over there. All right.
Great.
Nicole, all yours.
Once again, thank you for coming out. I worked in Nepal with an organization called the Association for Craft Producers. My focus was in looking at ICTs in fair trade, specifically handicrafts. So here's an overview of what we're going to talk about. The Association for Craft Producers, who are they? A few facts about Katmandu and Nepal. What my initial plan was, how that changed, what was accomplished, and what the takeaway was. So who is ACP? Hold on a second, my notes are a little slow here. They were founded in 1984. They are the largest fair trade organization in Nepal. There are 1,200 artisans. 90% of them are women, and they are primarily illiterate. There are 22 different skill categories, and they have a very spacious 45,000 square foot facility located in Katmandu. The women, though, they work all around the Katmandu Valley, so their products come and go from the warehouse. So at the organization, they have 3 product designers, which is interesting because they have degrees in painting, which kind of indicates what's going on there in terms of design education. The focus there is really for fine art, not so much for design, either product, graphic, or web design. So the store that sells all the local goods that are produced at ACP is called Dakuti, and it is actually, I think they were hoping that there would be some Nepali customers, but there's only 10% Nepali customers. So it's 90% foreigners and expats that frequent the store. They do export also to 18 different countries. So a little bit about Katmandu. It's an amazing city. I really loved being there. The GDP is $525 per capita, which is similar to Rwanda and Tanzania. The population of Nepal is 30 million in the Katmandu district, and 30 million across Nepal, and then in Katmandu, 1.75 million. The mortality rate is, the infant mortality rate is 49.5 per 1,000 live births, which is similar to Cambodia. So just a few facts. So who turned out the lights? This commonly happens in Nepal. The load shedding schedule, which you become very familiar with. There are between 4 to 18 hours daily without power. This load shedding schedule is distributed through text messages, either online or in the paper. So load shedding is the practice of making the power grid come down so that you don't have the entire power grid go out all at once. Nepal's energy system is hydroelectric. And there are generators where I was working at the Association for Craft Producers. However, there's a diesel and petrol shortage going on right now in Nepal, so sometimes the generators worked and sometimes they didn't. There are no street signs, which makes navigating very interesting. I said on several occasions, if I wasn't heading to work, I just kind of hoped that I got to where I was headed, and sometimes I made it and sometimes I came up with a new plan. So everything is based on landmarks. Someone will say, you know, go up to the supermarket, make a right, and then you'll be heading in the direction of Kupendol, and my house will be on the left after the big red sign. And sometimes it's easy, and sometimes it's not so easy. So that kind of reflects how much of an informal society they are in terms of infrastructure. They have their kind of their own sense of time and order, and things sometimes happen without a plan. So this is a picture of the construction site located right next to ACP. And that couch is where everyone lounged when they weren't working on the construction site. So this is the security guard, I think. And he's just kind of hanging out there. So there are 67 different ethnic classes in Nepal and 4 castes, which makes it kind of challenging for everybody to be on the same page. Caste has a very large impact on the growth and progress within Katmandu. Caste is supposedly illegal, but it is very much alive and creates inequalities in wealth and power distribution. There are many governmental issues in Katmandu. There's a 250% tax on cars, for example, which makes driving very much a luxury. Okay. So this was my initial plan, what I thought I was going to Nepal to do. Well, first, I had a month in the States. I surveyed fair trade retailers, and my objective with surveying them was to ask them questions about how they use the internet for e-commerce. I also wanted to surface information about product heritage and how they selected the products that they chose. So I did do that research, and then I ended up in Nepal for 2 months, and my objective initially was to look at the feasibility of e-commerce at the Association for Craft Producers. So why e-commerce? Because there's a great opportunity to reach a broader market. However, is reaching the broader market really the problem? No. So what is it that I overlooked? And in some ways, it really is the context of the problem that I was not paying attention to while I was here coming up with my plan. So one huge factor is that the educated leave Nepal. I definitely couldn't help with that in my time there. But there were 3 vacancies in the Association for Craft Producers in management, which you can imagine. There's about 60 full-time staff in the warehouse. So the vacancies had a pretty large impact on what was going on inside the facility. There's also been a lot of attrition in the last 10 years in the major departments. And they also don't have the funds to pay competitively, which has a huge impact on who they can hire. They generally hire people that are new, and then those people get trained, and oftentimes they leave. There's also a huge increase in the absentee population. People are migrating to the Middle East and also to Western countries where they can make more money. So that population also is the demographic that is of reproductive age, so they're seeing a decline in population. And the diaspora is also responsible for 20% of the GDP in remittances. This is a huge point that was brought to my attention right when I got there. There's a German advisor who's working with them for 2 years. And she came up to me and said, you know, what are you going to leave with us when you go? You know, you're a consultant, you have two months here. Like, what's your plan? So, you know, keeping in mind that my plan was only 2 months to be there, I started to really realize, you know, I might have more of a negative impact if I didn't really, you know, connect with the people and ask what their needs were. I mean, given the fact that in 1 year there are 9 consultants that came through ACP, which you can imagine it's challenging to transition, to continually transition everyone else's plans for how they can succeed. So I came up with a new plan. My new plan was integrating technology into existing systems and communications. And also education and creating new technology systems and focusing on consistency. With also very specific focus on what could be managed with existing resources. And then also keeping in mind the nature of Nepali culture, which is collectivist and hierarchical. This greatly impacts the way that they see society. There's more of a focus on the individual, and they place a lot of value on face-to-face communication. So the way that it impacts their use of technology is that they generally use technology for organizing information, and they don't see it so much as a tool for communicating. So they don't really use email that much. They prefer to send CDs with their products on them instead of, you know, putting them up online. And they also duplicate a lot of spreadsheets instead of sharing spreadsheets. So that was where I started. Like, let's talk about internal communication. Email is a great way to increase accountability. I found out that there were only 4 email addresses that were shared between 15 people. There's a huge fear of misuse of email, which I think goes back to the cultural issues. And then also how they would handle it if an employee left and they had an email address. That was a large concern of them. So we started to do some investigation and looked at what their servers and ISP, like what the limitations were there, and they started to be a little bit more open to the idea, specifically because only 25% of the orders were going out on time. So accountability is a huge issue. People just casually say, yeah, I'm going to take care of that, no problem. And then, you know, there's no specific time that it's going to be accomplished in or defining the task. So my objective was to have them move more towards email to address that. Also, their focus is on a daily basis. It's very tactical. They don't focus on strategy. So I had the opportunity to work with Caroline, who was the German advisor. And she helped me to better understand how things are not tracked and how challenging it is sometimes to actually get to the bottom of what the problem is. So her time, she had been there for about 3 months, was really looking at like she came up with a figure that 25% of production is on time. So we started to kind of have conversations about market research and active sales and what that looks like and how to be more strategic about it. I also had the opportunity to use the survey data. So there's been a lot of growth in the last 10 years in the fair trade industry. 80% of the people that I surveyed started their businesses in the last 10 years. So it's changed dramatically since they entered the market in 1984. The LOHAS, which is the Life of Health Style or Health and Sustainability market, is a $28 billion industry, and they only spend 1% of their discretionary spending on fair trade. So it's pretty much an untapped market. I also spoke with them a little bit about how the retailers that I interviewed were using the internet for selling and promoting. Then we focused on client communication, product promotion, with a little bit of social media. So there's several fair trade organizations, not several, there's probably about 30 that work with them, but there's a few that have videos online. So one of my suggestions to them was to link to existing media online. Those are resources that are free. It doesn't require a lot on their side to make it happen. The other issue that we were looking at was how product collections get launched. So currently, like I said, they're sending out CDs in the mail. Some of them get returned. And it's also very difficult to convince them that the internet would be a good option because the internet is extremely slow there. They really only feel safe uploading like 1 megabyte attachments. So we started to have conversations about how we could utilize Facebook to put up the new collections. One of the big concerns was how do we keep those new designs safe since there's no intellectual property in Nepal. I also said Facebook would be a good opportunity for customer satisfaction to be up and to also be talking about all the things that they're doing. Acrobat, just they're already making PDFs. If we could put bookmarks in to make it that much easier for their clients to see the products that they're mentioning. And then email marketing, which I think speaks to trying to have more consistent contact with their clients because they currently don't actively have a process. It's sort of ad hoc how things go out. So then my background is in design. So I spent a little bit of time looking at their logo. And I really started to realize that if we're going to be promoting them more, we really need to handle some of the inconsistencies that are happening with their branding and their logo and the image that they're putting out. Up here right now, these are 3 different ways that they're presenting their logo. The top one's from their letterhead, the middle's from their website, and the bottom is from a catalog. So in my time, I also started to see what was actually going on with the logo. It was extremely degraded. You can see the logo on the left is the original logo, and the logo on the right is the degraded and digitized logo. Someone digitized it for them somewhere along the way. They don't know who. My sense is that it was done as a one-off, like, oh, I'll help you out and digitize this. But then this is actually the logo that's on all their materials right now, the one on the right, the degraded one. And it was interesting because it was such a participatory experience to have these conversations with them around brand. We used Apple, started talking about, everyone knows Apple, but what's Apple's logo? They're so consistent with their application. They're kind of somebody that we could turn to that they would understand what a good brand looks like. So we went into the rebrand, had many meetings talking about the modernization and how to keep up with trends in the market. We reviewed current inconsistencies in the logo, the way the logo was being applied. And there was a huge concern about maintaining the Nepali feeling, the rich history of craft in Nepal. So the logo that is here is based on the Bhaktapur Gate, which is, it's a very well-known area in Katmandu in the valley. It's one of the 3 original kingdoms. The Golden Gate represents, really represents artisans and craft in Nepal. So we really wanted to maintain that. So here's the new logo that I worked on for them. It was created and applied across all their materials with a consideration for the family of brands. So Dakuti and then Nepali Craft Trading, which is the organization that they export through. And it was interesting in this because we also had a big conversation about balancing English and Nepali fonts, which I felt like was reflecting culture and their, their desire to take both sides into consideration. It was also fun to work with the Devanagari, the Nepali font, as a designer. Campaigns, so they are doing so many cool things. They're a fair trade organization that really takes the initiative, and they have an amazing greening of the facility there. So they reuse a lot of paper in their products. There's water-based inks. There's rainwater catchment. So one of the ideas that a designer had was to create a bag. So we ended up coming up with this design and collaborating and then screen printing it with the objective of creating a campaign across shopping bags, posters, store signage, brochure, really helping him to use the technology available to create consistency. And that was something that, given his background in fine arts, was maybe something that he had never been exposed to. So I really enjoyed the opportunity to work with him. So a few lessons to consider. The internet is an experience that's dependent on context. There were 4 days. There was no internet. No one knew why. No one was investigating what was going on with it. I think on the 4th day, the old IT person was called, and he contacted the ISP and said, "What's up?" And then I think it finally came back on. So one of their major issues, too, it's not just the connection speed, but it's also they're working with outdated software, outdated hardware. There's huge issues in piracy, even if they do have decent software. And it's really hard to get updates over a really slow connection. There's no intellectual property, which sounds nice, right? But a Nepali IP address is really bad news. I had some painful experiences wanting to stream some of my favorite shows. Couldn't get onto ABC, couldn't access my Netflix. There's a lot of limitations, and there's a lot of fear about things being ripped off. Another thing, too, is content providers really don't like countries like Nepal. They're not excited to provide them services, not a lot of opportunity. Which goes into this. Adobe offers software grants to China, Romania, and India, but not Nepal, which I thought was interesting. That was one of the things I investigated. And from this, I sort of, the theory I have is that CSR is probably not popular in a country when it doesn't look like it's going to be developing anytime soon. So what's next? I've been in contact with someone at the design school there. I think design education and capacity building is an important next step for them. And then also how to sustain heritage, because that's a big concern at ACP, while also moving forward and being more competitive in the market. Any questions?
Nice job, Nicole. And you finished in 17 minutes and 32 seconds.
Excellent.
Anyone have questions for Nicole?
The elephant was a huge area of tension. The elephant ended up going out mostly because I would have to say there's probably 30 different applications of the logo, and one of them is that it gets sewn and stitched, it's weaved. And the complexity of this logo is it does not translate well into stitch work. So my objective was to really give them something that was highly recognizable and really clean. And I showed them options with the elephant, and they agreed. It took a little while because we like the elephant, and the elephant was another symbol in Bhaktapur of sort of their heritage. But yeah. I forgot to mention that when we talked about using Facebook, we talked about having a Facebook page that would be password protected. So that was really where we were at when I left, was that we would have that under password protection, or that someone would have to join the group so that they would know who was accessing their designs. But it's also just something that happens. I mean, I think that they've become aware of the fact they can't control that.
How would your experience have been different if you hadn't been in this program? So if you would have gone—
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I probably really would have pushed on e-commerce. I think I would have been much more rigid about my objectives and really thought that, that maybe they didn't know what they needed. So I think like our coursework in Global Development 1 and 2 really helped me to think about culture, to think about context. What's their experience? What do they have access to? What is their culture like as a whole that might make them more or less apt to turn to something like e-commerce?
When is your logo going to go live?
It is going live. The new collection will be coming out May 24th, and we have a plan for how the new logo will be announced, which was kind of exciting because they've never promoted themselves before. And they looked at this as really an opportunity to say, this is who we are, and this is what it means. This is what our logo means. There's a meaning behind it. They've never told anyone what it means. So.
And second question, so when I pulled up ACP, it came up really fast. So is it being served?
No, that is something that I did investigate. It's actually located in Nepal. It was a conversation that I had with them as it relates to SEO, and knowing that if their site is hosted in Nepal, that it is less likely to come up in search engines in the States, or actually where their markets were. And what they had said to me was that they had previously had it hosted, I think it was in the US, and they had had issues that had come up. So it was one of those things where I didn't want to push on it, but I also wanted to make them aware of the fact that they weren't maybe reaching their demographic.
It did come up quite fast.
That's great. The power must be up.
Let's go ahead and wrap this up for now. Oh, sorry, Becky, you have a question?
I just wondered, are you going to continue your relationship with them?
I am, yeah. I've been in contact with them. I have some things I'm wrapping up. I had some ideas about how to maybe work with them in the future, dependent on funding, and also just trying to navigate, where they're headed, and if I can play a role in where they're headed.
Okay, we're going to move it over to Kevin, but I want to just let you know, Nicole's being very modest. She spent all last summer learning Nepali. She kept it going all this year. A great way of trying to fit in and get as much accomplished as possible.
Learning this script really helped.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for coming. My name is Kevin Mcelhaney, and my practicum was working for an organization called Green Wi-Fi, and primarily I worked with Bruce Bakey, who's actually the founder. And I got involved into a project that's been going on for a couple years, and it's in a general sense a solar-powered computer lab project that's located in a school in Las Caobas, Haiti, which is in the Central Plateau region, kind of indicated by that blue icon right there. So kind of what we're going to go over is definitely going to talk about the project overview and some of the background, because this has been an ongoing project and there's been a number of people and organizations involved. And then we'll talk about how Atlas got involved, and specifically the ICTD program, and figuring out what my practicum requirements might be. I did get to go down to the FACAP school twice. Once in December, which was a little bit premature in terms of being ready for that practicum to start, but we kind of made the best that we could out of that trip. And then once again in February to finish up a few things. And then we'll talk about specifically the application software that I developed to present the solar monitoring information, which is kind of what the project is about. And then certainly want to talk about what I think could be next. This is kind of a beginning stage project in terms of data capture that we're hoping can be reused in other solar systems. And then we can talk about questions certainly if we have any. So in a very general sense, what this project is trying to do is capture solar energy and basically move that energy from the solar panels into a big bank of batteries and then charge these laptops. And so all the laptops that they have at this particular school are OLPCXOs. And so Green Wi-Fi is an organization that's based out of San Francisco, and in a very general sense, what they've done for a number of years all over the globe is set up small-scale kind of solar-powered internet connectivity. IAT Empowering Haiti is actually a group of students at the Illinois Institute of Technology, and led by one of their instructors who had a partnership with Bruce, who runs Green Wi-Fi. They have this class very similar to our lab class, where they get students from different disciplines across the university, and they work on real-world projects. And this is one of those projects that's been passed on from class to class to class. So they've actually been involved in this project for a number of years. OLPC is obviously involved because Haiti was a recipient of these upwards of 10,000 laptops at one point in time. I think it was 2008, that were essentially useless because most of the schools that they were intended to go in don't have any electricity. Invenio, which you're going to hear a lot more from Matt, is a fantastic company, and they were really great to work with. And they do internet connectivity, especially in hard-to-reach places. And then Atlas, I'm mentioning again because not only was I involved this term, but there was another group of students, Alexandra, Nicole, and Miriam, that are here today, that they did a lot of the legwork that impacted what we actually built this term. So a couple other details that are worth mentioning. So this whole project started based on a conversation that Bruce had with the OLPC coordinator when he met him at a conference. And the coordinator is telling them, hey, we have all these laptops, but we have no way to use them, we have no power. Bruce was in contact with Dr. Hosman, who is a faculty at IIT, and she's developing this class where they wanted real-world projects to work on. And so from the time period of just having that conversation to a year and a half later, these students across a couple classes actually developed a prototype, a couple panels powering some batteries that were actually powering these laptops. They started taking this small-scale prototype to conferences, and they were actually getting a lot of momentum, and they started raising funds so they could actually send students down to do a pre-assessment trip. During the pre-assessment trip, they're essentially looking at sites, and they're trying to figure out which of these schools in this region are going to be the most appropriate for the equipment, the security of the equipment, as well as primarily how vested are the administrators of the school in terms of keeping up the equipment and utilizing it and things like that. So fast forward 8 months later, they actually raised enough funds to send 7 students down to actually do the install at the AVCAP school. And so that photo in the top left is actually students from IIT. These are all undergrads, by the way, that are installing solar panels. They're led by Bruce Bakey from Green Wi-Fi, but they also had a number of regional solar installers. And the reason that these regional folks were interested in helping out with this system is because it's novel in some way in that it's only a DC system. In other words, most solar systems take the DC current from the panels, run it through an inverter, and then you can actually plug in the normal devices that you have that are normally operate on alternating current. So the approach that this group took was, well, when we do that conversion, you actually lose a percentage of the power, and let's say on average it's about 20%, which is, from what my research is, about accurate. So they say, well, why, if we just took that 20% off the top, we could actually decrease the size of the system, so less panels, less batteries, therefore just reducing the cost of the entire system about 20%. So after the installation, everybody goes home, and they were a little bit dissatisfied with the level of kind of communication feedback from the school in terms of they took all these students down and they purchased all this equipment and they had no kind of feedback, well, is this thing still running? Is it on? And so they kind of engaged our program to talk about, could we develop some kind of monitoring application to help inform us on what's going on with the system? Is it operating effectively? At first, it's kind of just simple questions. Is the system even on? Or are the laptops being charged? And could we find out certain things like how many laptops are being charged on any given day? And the last question is it sized appropriately? And when you design a system like this, you make a certain amount of estimations based on the load that you expect. And so is the load is actually realized in terms of what we expected it might be. So those conversations kind of filter down into a basic set of system requirements. This is kind of distilled. But the 3 major issues we had to tackle were, first was internet connectivity. At the time of the installation, there's no internet connectivity, so how do we accomplish a remote monitoring solution when there's no way to get data out of the school? So luckily, Bruce works in this co-working space in San Francisco, which just happens to be the place where Invenio works. And Bruce, in the meantime, becomes a senior director for Invenio. So he negotiates getting the school hooked up for internet access. Alongside that, they actually received some funds from the Internet Society grant, which was going to pay for internet service for 2 years, because this service clearly is not free. So once we had that kind of hurdle figured out, we had to figure out, well, how are we going to actually interact with the hardware? How are we going to gather this information from it? And so based on the decisions that were already made on the equipment purchase for the charge controller. And the charge controller, in a very simple way, is the device that's in between the panels that are on the roof and the bank of batteries that you might see on the ground. And it basically filters out the appropriate amount of power to send to the battery so you don't overcharge them or send too high a voltage that they can't handle. So the charge controller is actually an intelligent device, but there's no way to get that information off of that device without being in front of it. And so the vendor, which is Outback Power, they make another box that very simply just takes that information and lets you put it on the network. And then what we also found out was if you have two charge controllers, you have to have another box. So you can talk to both of them at once. So the Outback Mate 3 is a box that hooks up the charge controller information to the network. The hub allows us to talk to two charge controllers at once, both required for our application because they had two charge controllers at this school. We also were going to need a server, so we needed some way to communicate with the Mate 3, get that data, store it into a database, and then eventually serve it on a website. And we're going to get into some of those requirements here in a second. So a FitPC is it's a very small form factor, low power kind of computer. Bruce has used them in previous projects with some success. So that was kind of recommended in terms of the hardware we should use. It also accepts 12 volts, which is critical for this DC-only system. From the software side, the requirements were that it needed to be web-based. They wanted to develop using open source software. On a simple level, it just needed to collect this information and make it available to the public. And it really needed to meet the needs of multiple audiences. And I wanted to take a step back and talk about the work that the students did the previous semester, which was identifying all the users that were going to be using this system. Both the ones, the Ministry of Education, for example, OLPC folks, regional solar installers that were interested in kind of the novelty of the DC-only approach, as well as Bruce and his colleagues to do troubleshooting for the system. So very, very simple, relatable information as well as very technical information. So all of that kind of research led to some design work that actually Nicole did, which you'll see here in a second. And the important part about mentioning that is it impacted the actual application that we built. Everything was intentional in terms of the things that we added to the system. And then the last piece is that they wanted it to be as replicable as possible. And the reason for that is they wanted to continue doing these projects at different schools. And so they wanted to have this monitoring component built into their kind of model of if we put a solar installation at this school, we want to know how well it's performing as well as the previous school and things like that. And so we had to consider that in the development. So a simplified image of kind of what this architecture looks like. We have our charge controller, which is that big box in the middle. Again, it's regulating the appropriate amount of power that goes to the battery bank, which charges the laptops. At the same time, we have our new boxes. The Mate 3 right now represents the Mate 3 and the hub. This is a concept diagram. And again, that makes the information from the charge controller available to the network, which is connected to the network router. And then our FitPC is going to be collecting this data for us so we can get it. So all that is kind of pre-December, my December trip, which is almost before the practicum starts. So I got up to speed as fast as possible, and I knew I had two goals to accomplish to kind of keep this project rolling at the pace we expected it to when I went down in December. So the two goals I had was to set up the monitoring hardware, so set up the Mate 3 and set up the hub, and then test the data collection software. And so there was actually a software application that was written to communicate with the Mate 3 that had not been fully tested yet. So we wanted to test that on our system to make sure that it actually worked and we can get the data into the database, and then we would worry about getting it onto a website. A couple of sides. I'm losing my fonts aren't wonderful there. Two discoveries that were actually interesting to mention. So the first day we arrive, we walk into the charging room, which is the room where all the laptops are and all the batteries are, and nothing's on. So no laptops are charging, and we discovered that a fuse had blown. And in talking with the administrators and some of the instructors, nobody knew when the fuse had blown, and nobody knew when the last time they were using the laptops were. And so this was kind of the first time for me, it was like, well, this would actually be useful to have this monitoring system. So then we would have been notified, and even if someone on site couldn't necessarily repair it, maybe somebody could be dispatched from a local repair shop to come out and take a look at the system. The second thing that was worth mentioning was that we got the fuse issue taken care of, and we got everything charging again, and we noticed that there was this buzzing coming from all the laptops. So we had upwards of 300 laptops that were all buzzing this high frequency noise. And so we learned that they had been shutting off the entire system every time they heard the buzzing because they were worried that they were damaging the laptops. And so after some research, we didn't actually discover the real reason, and so after we had internet and could research why this was happening, but we discovered that there was voltage drops occurring on the charging network. And so we basically have outside of the charge controller and the batteries, a bunch of wires that connect to places where you can plug in the actual laptops. And so there wasn't much we could do about that at that present time. We didn't have the right equipment. So we just didn't plug in as many. And then you could charge a certain number at a certain time. But that was something we're going to come back to shortly. The things that we did accomplish: internet connectivity. We spent 2 great days with the Invenio folks, and specifically 5 technicians from their BATI program, which is a capacity building program. And essentially what the Invenio is doing is they're training local technicians on how to do internet service setups, how to do network troubleshooting and things like that. We were setting up a campus wireless network. So the campus for the school is a handful of buildings, and it's big enough where one access point wasn't going to serve all the buildings. So we wanted to have internet access in multiple classroom buildings as well as the administration building. So we spent days installing panels on the roof, installing charge controllers for those panels, little batteries, and then wireless radios on top of those buildings. And so they were all communicating with a central receiver on essentially the biggest building on campus. And then the internet connectivity was all routed through this dish that this gentleman here on the lower right's holding. There was a handful of other things that I was involved in. There was a Wiki Server that was actually set up by a computer science student and given to these other students that had no idea how to set it up. So I found ways to be helpful, I guess is the bottom line. There's charging station racks that were built. You can see in the upper right-hand corner. The charging room without this rack was kind of just laptops strewn about. So this is kind of a more organized way to keep them well taken care of. There was teacher training and community surveys executed with a local translator to number one, introduce them to the internet. Google Images was a huge hit, try and set up email addresses for folks. And the surveys were trying to gather information about, they had just been there in August to do the install, so it only a few months had expired, but how are people feeling about access to technology, essentially? And so there was a couple days of those as well. So back to my responsibilities, was I able to get this equipment installed? And the answer is no. As might happen in many projects, you don't always end up with the equipment on site that you intended to. And so we get to the site and the 2 pieces of hardware that I was supposed to have weren't there. And so we attempted to source it locally. We were unsuccessful. However, we were able to get one of the 2 pieces overnighted from Miami, and it arrived the day that we left. So when our driver came from Port-au-Prince to Las Cabas to pick us up, and as everyone's packing up the car, I'm getting the mate out of the box and hooking it up to the wall and getting it on the network. And so we were able to get it onto the network and communicating on the network correctly. However, we were not able to test the software. We thought that would be okay because, 5 minutes, okay. That would be okay because we have internet connectivity, we have remote access. So we can just do that when we go home. Unfortunately, that didn't work either. There was 2 levels of problems. One was Invenio had never had anyone request a public IP address. So the school was essentially already behind a firewall. So luckily, Bruce is very connected with Invenio, so he got that one figured out. The second issue was everybody went home for Christmas break and they turned the whole thing off. So we didn't have access again until late January. Luckily for me, there was work still to do. I had to basically convert all of the design work that Nicole did into functional web pages. So I spent basically the next month working on that. Over the course of that month, I also discovered that the data capture tool that the first student developed was not going to work. The configuration, two reasons. One, the configuration that we had was a little bit different. 2, the test system that they have had another piece of hardware that we didn't have. So when we went back in February, it was a very short trip. Everything in the kind of upper left quadrant I worked on. The biggest thing was this DC distribution box, which is that white box, and that we actually added 3 circuits, 2 to the charging network so we wouldn't have that voltage buzzing issue, and 1 so all of our servers and network stuff would stay on even if they shut off the charging. Let's see. So quickly about the system software architecture, we basically have 2 pieces. One component talks to the mate device, and it's very simple. It just talks to the mate, to the mate, grabs all the information we're interested in, and writes it to a database. It does this on an interval, which for us right now is 15 minutes. It's configurable. You can change it to whatever interval you want. The reason we have to do that is the mate is a very simple device and just shows you real-time data. So to create historical data, we have to look and write it down. It does have very, very low-level basic alerts and notifications. In other words, Bruce wanted some specific rules for if the battery voltage drops below a certain threshold, we'll actually send him an email, and so we do that. The big piece of the application is everything on the lower right. So we're grabbing all this raw data. How do we make it useful for people? So the main features, as we kind of alluded to before, is we wanted to make this thing reusable. So for school projects, this makes a lot of sense. We have information about the project. We can talk about the specific solar solution they have. There's about our school. The font's really not good here. And the project affiliates, who is involved in the project. The center part of where all these graphs are allow you to grab energy generation information, battery voltages, amperages that are coming out of the batteries to power the laptop, to charge the laptops. And you can slice up any of that information on any of these time periods by day, by week, by month, by year, and since the inception of the project. And the last piece is we can really drill down. This is for the technical user. So you can actually see in any given hour what was reported from a particular charge controller, should you need that level of granularity. We also have this kind of widget feature where any of these items in the sidebar on the right are very configurable. So let's say your school needs a certain piece of information that doesn't come with the template, you can just write that little piece of code and plug it into kind of the template system, and it'll load it on whatever page you configure. I do want to mention that for the most part, a programmer is required to do this at this point, but so much of this is reusable. So the current status is we actually are live. So this is a snapshot as of this morning. The two links here, the first one is on Amazon hosting. So my mentor has pulled a disappearing act this week. So the last piece is to basically get this application up on his server. So we still need to do that. And the second link actually is live at the school. So the FIP PC that's actually at the school, we have the application installed and running as well. Now it really performs not very well, which is why we don't think that's the best place for it to live. But it does capture the data, and if you are patient enough, you can see the graphs that way. All the code's up on GitHub. The hope is that this is just the beginning of this project, and hopefully people will find this useful, and maybe we have some developers that might be interested in extending this or potentially fixing bugs, should there be any. What I think's next, we need way more feedback. It's been completed fairly recently, and it's been shown to a handful of people, but we need more people to look at it. Another idea that we investigated this term was incorporating networking metrics into the solar metrics. In other words, we were really trying to get at, is this technology being used? So the power tells us one thing. Does the laptops have the ability to be charged and used? Yes, they do. But does the networking metrics may tell us, are they using the internet? And if they are, what types of use is going on? And I realize there's some kind of delicate ground there in terms of privacy and things, but maybe there's a more general way to kind of report that. Even a simple way might be how many bytes are sent and received. You could do things like that. That might be informative. Hybrid data collection model involves not having a FIPC on site, maybe a simpler device, because those FIPCs are actually $300 or $400. They're not that inexpensive. I don't know if Raspberry Pi is the right one, but that one's very cheap, coming out very soon. We can talk about the API stuff if you're interested at the end. That might be a little bit too much. The reflection pieces for me was, this technically for me really ran the gamut. A lot of energy stuff that I'd never known, full stack development I had never done. So that was really interesting learning experience. And I also got to work with great organizations. It was wonderful to work with Bruce. The Invenio people are fantastic. And I spent actually a lot of time working with Nicole on trying as best as possible to meet her very excellent designs in terms of actually building out the application. So yeah, if there's any questions, I'm happy to take them.
John, how fast did that site pull up? I saw you.
It didn't, it was down.
No, don't say that.
So did you try the Haiti one?
Yeah, it mapped to 205 something, and then.
Yeah, so the Haiti, so this is part of the whole conversation on, so the original slide architecture had the server on site. And so what we found is the internet connectivity is not as reliable as you'd hope. And so that's one of the few reasons to not have it there, is because the internet goes down. But what's nice to have a computer there to actually pull is just because the internet down doesn't mean the power's down. So if you had a device on site that could still constantly talk to the mate, and then later get it late. Exactly. So that's something we'd move to. Yeah.
I was going to ask, you started talking in your presentation about how the new laptop charging technology required less panels because it was more efficient since you were going DC only. But after you add all this monitoring hardware, 24/7 servers, and all this uptime, where does that add to the energy infrastructure budget that would leave you on the site? So first, what you said, it's not new technology. I think it's just a different approach in terms of, so it just brings the cost of the capital cost down, correct? Is that what you're asking? Well, you said that was the main reason why this whole group went down and do that, was to do the new approach to the charging.
No, I don't know that's the reason that they went down there. They went down there to solve the first problem, which is to get power to the laptops. They came up with the approach and they thought it was novel, and it may be. It may or may not be. And one of the reasons that there could be a problem with the DC-only approach is what if you want to use it for other stuff? It's not easy to do. So right now, and actually if you look at some of the metrics that we have, the system is very underutilized. In other words, we have tons of power and it's not all being used. So number one, that's informative to say maybe we could come up with some other ways to use that because that system's already there. In terms of the cost, I understand it does cost money to have the servers and things like that, but I imagine over time, if the system is free and it's usable, the hosting costs that you're talking about are marginal comparatively to additional panels and things like that. I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Well, that was my question. Sorry, it was like you said that originally you needed less panels because you didn't have the overhead of the inverter going to AC.
No, originally they needed more panels. If you don't have.
Before your monitoring system, right? You did the charging with 20% less energy needed to charge the laptop.
Sure, yes.
But now you added all of this monitoring hardware and servers. So how many more panels and batteries did you have to use?
None. None. The only hardware, the server that we're using now that's on site is 12 volts and uses less than a watt. The Mate 3 and hub, I don't know what the power consumption is, but it's all power over Ethernet, so there's probably a max there in terms of how much power it draws. I don't know what the answer to that is, but I don't think it's a lot of power, I guess. Okay.
Awesome, and just so you guys know a little more background about Kevin, we threw him into a project in Nigeria last year at spring break, only after he had 1 semester of classes. This man has learned how to be so creative in the field. I think he bartered something for concrete, for an antenna, and yeah, you're pretty badass.
Just gotta make do.
All right, thanks very much.
All right.
Because as part of their practicums, they ended up, now they're actually employees of the organizations they're practicuming with. So not a bad thing to do, 3 semesters worth of work, get a job, and then have to finish up school. But Matt and Alexandra can.
All right, thank you. Again, my name is Alexandra Morgan. I'm a project manager with World Vision Haiti. I work on a project called Haiti Connected Schools, which is a pilot initiative that aims to deploy 40 school-based, and we're actually in the process of deploying 40 school-based computer laboratories in rural Haiti, some of the same areas that Kevin talked about. It's actually a partnership with Microsoft and Vaneo and a number of other local and international organizations. And so that's actually where I live. I live and work in Haiti, and I came back specifically to do this presentation. I will not actually speak about Haiti Connected Schools and what I do with World Vision. I will be talking specifically about language learning and technology in Haiti's educational reform, which has been influenced by research that kind of led me into the job that I have, and as well as the work that I do on the ground. So contextual analysis. Imagine, if you will, yourself in a classroom of 50, 60, 70 children and 1 teacher. You are a child eager to learn, but you sit in the back, and so you can't really see what's happening, or you sit over on the side in some awkward location and you can't hear. Nobody knows that because you haven't been diagnosed. Or you're a child that can't focus because you're hungry, or you haven't really had an opportunity to deal with some of the situations that you have at home. Or you can't keep up because you've been in and out of school. Or the pedagogical approach is not suitable to your learning needs. And on top of all of this, the teacher is speaking in a language that's not your language. It's similar, but it's not. Now imagine yourself on the other side of that same classroom as a teacher. What you have at your disposal is a chalkboard, your memory, some life experience, maybe a 6th or 9th grade education, and no formal teacher training. You speak and read and write some French, but your skills are not that strong. You haven't been paid in a month or two. And you have a classroom full of children and youth that have a host of needs to which you're not able or trained to attend. Or maybe you're a parent of a child in school and you don't read well or you don't understand French, so you can't help your child with their homework. But you do the best you can. You pay for their schooling, you make sure they have enough light to do their homework, you walk them to school in the morning, but you rely heavily on the school to ensure that your child has the education they need to succeed or do better than you. If you can picture these things, then you have begun to get a glimpse of a very prevalent dynamic in the Haitian educational context. It's certainly not the only dynamic. There are really good schools throughout Haiti, but it's absolutely an overwhelming reality in the Haitian educational landscape. Large classrooms, few resources, linguistic disparities, children that are hungry for knowledge but having a difficult time learning, overage children, sporadic or inconsistent enrollment, all under the guidance of underpaid and undertrained teachers who often, for very obvious reasons, are not in full compliance with the policies and laws of the country and are not effective teachers despite their most ardent efforts. Indeed, the learning environment, is an extremely complex cultural historical activity system. More than 65% of children that are able to begin school actually start school, so not all the children. Approximately 25% of those children actually finish primary school. The numbers continue to decline, and by the time we look at university graduates, an estimated 8 out of every 1,000 children that entered primary school actually earn a university degree. That's far less than 1%. In the aftermath of the 2010 earthquake, Haiti has had a unique opportunity, an obligation to reform and transform its educational system, which includes decentralization of some of these opportunities outside of the Port-au-Prince metropolitan area. What are the solutions as they're looking to reform the education system? Of course, it's multifaceted, but one aspect is that's being tried and explored and talked about is the integration of technology in schools. And why not? Technology has the potential to expand and equalize educational opportunities. It's in fact the actual reason I applied for this master's program, and as I mentioned, it's what I am paid to do every day. So it's from this place of advocacy for technology integration and practical experience that I want to discuss briefly learning, language, and technology in the educational reform that's happening in Haiti. So I know I've laid out a pretty grim picture of education in Haiti, but let me outline some of the progress that's been made. So we have all of these players and many, many, many more. The Haitian government has set up a national fund for education that is sending kids to school free, for free. That's actually supported by the Constitution, but the reality on the ground is that 90% of schools are private schools. And so children are obligated to pay for school in order to get any sort of education. The IDB is building schools and building governmental capacity. Accenture is working with IDB to consult the Haitian government. They're building out an ICT sector or department within the Ministry of Education. They're also taking some time to understand every single ICT for Education initiative that's happening in the country and documenting that and figuring out a system to help the ministry make decisions. MIT Haiti initiative has been doing a lot with STEM education in Creole. Microsoft and Invenio and World Vision are working on Haiti Connected Schools project. Invenio is building out a rural broadband network. Digicel is building schools. Voila is paying for connectivity. NatCom is doing the same thing for 100 schools. Educatech is a local company. They're doing a lot. Clinton Bush Haiti Fund is funding a lot of initiatives. Educavision and Deschamps are both publishing houses, and they're in the process of digitizing content. And of course, there's a number of initiatives to actually reconstruct schools that were damaged in the earthquake, in addition to rebuilding. So we have governmental leadership or emerging leadership. We have international multi-sectoral partnerships. We have expanding technology infrastructure. We have existing schools, reconstructed schools, soon to be constructed schools. We have some human resources. So what's missing? if we take this as a framework for understanding what's just not there right now, we have the conditions. There's a need for adaptive, decentralized education model, and that's in the process. The ministry is in the process of working on that, again, with IDB and Accenture. And then, of course, harmonized multi-sectoral financial and technical investments, which I talked about. So let's say conditions are a go. Systems, communication infrastructure, power availability, technologies, institutions. There's a broadband network that's being expanded. There's more IT providers. There's solar that's being proliferated throughout the country. So I would say systems are a go. And there's universities, of course, that focus on technology. People, the participation of youth, women and the disabled, sector and community leaders, IT professionals, and of course, the diaspora. We're doing that a little bit, but we could do a lot more work in that area. And so let's say it's a go, but it's not as strong as the other two areas. And that leaves us with curriculum. Creole as a primary language of curriculum and instruction, and a combination of domestically and internationally created content is virtually non-existent. Digital curriculum in Creole. So hard copy curriculum is not really existent, but certainly not digital curriculum. It's not contextualized for the Haitian context. There are a few exceptions that I can think of. I mentioned them, Deschamps, Educavision, and MIT Haiti Initiative. There may be others, but the fact that I don't know about them, I think underscores their virtual non-existence. So why does this matter? What does it matter that Creole is the language of instruction, at least in the early grades, and that materials are made in Creole? What does it really matter, especially when there's another, official language that's French? Well, learning, like all activity, occurs in a context. The conditions that have been set, the systems in place, the people around, the culture, the history, and indeed the language that people speak, learning exists in a context. So simply importing foreign digital materials in one of the national languages that most of the people don't speak, with themes and images that are completely decontextualized is not sufficient for strengthening education in the country and making the most of the potential of technology resources to help achieve desired learning outcomes. Benson, in a study commissioned by the Education for All Global Monitoring Report of 2005, writes, and I think this is interesting because it's all the things that I've concluded, but to find that other people are in this same sort of mindset was affirming for me. While there are many factors involved in delivering quality basic education, language is clearly the key to communication and understanding in the classroom. Many developing countries are characterized by individual as well as societal multilingualism, yet continue to follow a single foreign language to dominate the education sector. Instruction through a language that learners do not speak has been called submersion because it is analogous to holding learners underwater without teaching them how to swim. Compounded by chronic difficulties such as low levels of teacher education, poorly designed inappropriate content, lack of adequate facilities, submersion makes learning and teaching extremely difficult, particularly when the language of instruction is also foreign to the teacher. This is absolutely the situation in Haiti. So if we know this, and we're seeking to expand technology to improve learning among students from an ICTD perspective, why would we promote technology for development, and while doing this, not promote the creation of relevant, contextualized, mother tongue-based digital content that supports development, given the technology capacity to do so? And following this approach, without adequate attention to curriculum, we essentially are providing another tool with which to submerge learners and widen this opportunity gap. What I've experienced in the field is that we can only, provide technology in certain areas, and likely, and most often, those are areas that have some sort of infrastructure, some sort of leadership, some sort of, stability already in place, and certainly a system in place that allows students more opportunities for learning. So we're really widening the opportunity gap by not addressing some of these language issues. Opportunities. So the good news is that this gap presents tremendous opportunities for creativity and innovation. Let me remind you of Haiti's assets. Again, governmental leadership, international multi-sectoral partnerships, expanding technology infrastructure, schools, human resources, but also a dynamic and highly skilled and highly educated diaspora, and also interactive radio instruction in Haitian Creole, as well as a number of hard copy books. And that actually may present some opportunities to use that content and convert it into a format that can be used online or on computers or what have you. So I have a few recommendations going forward in order to fill this hole and really create a dynamic, create a system that addresses the needs of children. One is the evaluation of Haitian Creole and the development of Creole materials, digital materials in particular. We kind of put the cart before the horse in the sense that we're spreading technology all over the country, and so they have all of these materials, but the way that they can use the technology is tremendously limited because most content online, for example, is in English. Most content that we provide has been imported, and then there's virtually no materials in Creole. Haitian materials must be more than just materials in Creole, they must be Haitian. And so a lot of times publishers, particularly if they're trying to provide some sort of support to Haiti as it goes through its reform, will simply translate existing materials. And so you'll get something like a polar bear, and in Creole, they're talking about this sort of thing, or very, very out of, very irrelevant sort of things for children in Haiti. And so it needs to be more than just Creole, it needs to be Haitian. Haitian-driven technological innovation. So moving beyond improving the design of technology, we spent a lot of time in the program thinking about how to design technology that actually suits the context in which we're trying to make change. And what I think needs to be advocated in this context is Haitian-driven technology innovation, and surely in other contexts where there's a full integration of Haitians and Haitian institutions. There are technology institutions in the country, and this should be the aim. Not simply development through the implementation of technology, but development through the design and development of technological solutions. So in doing so, we really begin to build capacity in the country to solve problems that technology can address, and for Haitians to be able to do that on their own and actually have the skills to do so. Action research. There's a lot of things going on, but not a lot of research. There's actually a real paucity of research in the Latin American and Caribbean region. So there's a lot happening, and we really need to document this stuff so we can learn from it and build upon it. Free and open educational resources. What is available in Creole costs money, and most schools don't have money. Online and offline solutions. Being able to, not all schools are connected. I mean, we have some connected schools, we have some internet, we have some ability to connect schools to the internet, but actually not everywhere yet. And so those schools can receive technology, but they can't get online. And then those who can get online are sometimes not connected. So providing options such as learning management systems that are built for occasionally connected environments, as well as sort of these e-libraries that you put on computers with a host of information would be really helpful and really smart investments. Flexible, adaptable models rather than in-a-box approaches. There is no one-size-fits-all. So, this in-the-box approach I think is deceiving, and we really ought to move away from it so that solutions are built around what the schools need and the actual culture of the school, and not the mere desire to integrate technology, because it creates situations where the technology is there and it's not really serving any valuable purpose. And then, of course, strengthening the process for training teachers so they really know how to use this technology. Currently, there are standards for how the teachers can teach ICT skills for secondary, but there's no standards by which to train teachers how to teach these courses. So with all of these sort of options available and all of the sort of creativity and innovation that can occur, there's definitely constraints. I mentioned submersion, so this continued subjugation and refusal to use Haitian Creole in schools. This is historical, it's cultural, it's not easy to change, yet under the Constitution, Creole is equal to French and should be enabled to develop scientifically and harmoniously. As a matter of fact, Article 5 of the Haitian Constitution of 1987 states that all Haitians are united by a common language. And then in Article 213, it actually discusses this need to standardize Creole, which has been done. But the opportunity to really develop it and see it as an intellectual language of sorts is not there. Centralization. There's a real need to make sure that educational opportunity expands beyond Port-au-Prince because most of the population is outside of Port-au-Prince. And so the government needs to be diligent about concentrating their efforts on making those opportunities available. And then lastly, none of the innovation and none of these real constraints can be mitigated without political stability, without a strong and coherent government. And so the government plays a major role in driving the integration of technology, and they are playing a role. There's a really excited government in place right now, but they must lead in order for ICT initiatives to actually take shape and have an influence in the country. So let me close with some words from the preamble of the Haitian Constitution, because I actually believe that constitutions are the bedrock of society, and that's how you can actually measure and judge if a country is really doing right by its people and really providing for them in the way that they need to. The Haitian people proclaim this constitution in order to strengthen national unity by eliminating all discrimination between the urban and rural populations, by accepting the community of languages and culture, and by recognizing the right to progress, information, education, health, employment, and leisure for all citizens. And so my prayer is that Haiti does this for its people and its posterity, and that ICTD helps realize this for all of Haiti's people, that we're careful to not perpetuate the status quo, but really strive towards transforming places and institutions into places that promote and ensure access and opportunity, regardless of language, locale, or economic status. And certainly in the case of Haiti, I work each day, and I know many others work each day, to ensure that ICTD actually helps transform the country into a place where there's institutions where children learn. Thank you. The kids, that's my one picture that I...
If anyone walks the talk, you see why she has a job and is an emerging star in the Haitian studies in Haitian political realm.
Okay. Questions?
Any questions for Alexandra?
Please.
I have one.
Sure.
You mentioned early on Imagine, and so the teacher is in the classroom in front of 50 or 60 children, and indeed has only perhaps an 8th or 9th grade education. Is that the norm?
It's very prevalent. As a matter of fact, the estimates are that 15 to 25% of teachers in the entire country have formal training to be a teacher. In the Central Plateau in particular, that percentage is around 5% of teachers actually trained to be teachers. So it is the norm. Yeah.
So in terms of objectives for the practicum piece, what would you say your objectives going into it were?
I think that my objective was to have a better understanding of how technology is being integrated into the education system, and what ways are we being effective and what ways are we not being very effective, and how can we then, after identifying that, really improve upon it. So I have obvious tensions in my job, but one thing that I've said to myself and the way that I've reconciled some of my frustrations is by seeing what is there and seeing it as a beginning. And so what I see for Haiti Connected Schools, for example, is that we are really building out the technology infrastructure, and that presents opportunities that were not there before. And so in thinking about how we improve education, I see one step as technology integration because it's already happening. But how do we go forward and ensure that this technology is really making an impact? And it's really being used well. And so that's sort of what I've allowed my work to teach me. And I think it's an important objective in continuing the advocacy and really continuing to influence education quality in the country. Okay.
Well, I'm Matt Crum, and I've working with Invenio. So it's kind of interesting. The more experience that I've had in ICTD, I keep seeing the same faces pop up over and over again. And I've not been in it very long as I'm graduating, so, which is really interesting. So yeah, a little bit about Invenio. I guess how I came about it is during the program, I just kept seeing this name, Invenio, over and over again. And whenever we were doing our lab, which was helping develop this classroom that was connected to computers, like kind of just a computer lab for a school in Zambia, we used a lot of content from Invenio. And then I used to work for an organization called World Vision. They also work with Invenio a lot, and they seem to know, like, I seem to learn a lot from them and their work. And so I was like, all right, this would be a cool place to check out. So, so one of their big things is being able to connect different communities to information communication technology that may not have otherwise had that opportunity. And so there's all kinds of different reasons to do this. I mean, be it education, healthcare, economic development. And as you've heard, like some of the applications from previous folks that have been up and talking, I mean, I guess mostly the education piece has been talked about there, and but I mean, it's an exciting thing. So we don't actually do the healthcare programs or the education programs or the economic development. We're kind of knowledgeable on it, like on a higher level, but our thing is getting that connected for it to work. And so since I've done a lot of different things during my practicum, and they've had me involved in a lot of different projects. And so this is kind of our team. And again, there's two people that have already been featured in other people's slides. And so the two projects that I want to talk about is, and I should have put Nairobi/Dadaab, and that was one of the trip that I went on, and that was basically to Dadaab. Overall is the largest refugee camp in the world. There's over 500 million estimated. I mean, who knows what exactly the numbers are, but it's estimated 500,000 people are in this refugee camp, and it's been there for many years. It's like a little city pretty much. And so we wanted to be able to get internet access to this camp to be able to support these NGOs that are working in Dadaab. Because there's a lot of NGOs that are there. Obviously their headquarters is not going to be in Dadaab, so they need to be able to communicate back and forth very easily, transfer files very easily to different people within their organization, like in different spots. As well as one of the cool things that I learned was like in this project had involved in was to be able to create an internal network in Dadaab, because one of the things that was really encouraging was that all these NGOs, like, they work together on the ground, like, at least in this particular context. Like, they share files, they share all these different things because they're all living in Dadaab. Like, they all, like, they see each other all the time, like, and so we wanted to help create a network for them to be able to share their own resources back and forth and have this internal fast network. So if they need to transfer files and digital data, they can do that very easily. And the other project is TZ21, and so that's about building community knowledge centers. I'll be saying CKCs a lot. It's basically a fancy name for a computer lab, but they have different purposes, and that's really what they are, computer labs. It just sounds a lot nicer. And so the part that I'm working on now, it's going to be, the pilot is going to be in two major spots in Tanzania, Mtwara and Zanzibar, and then hopefully it'll be rolled out into the entire country later. And so Nairobi, so So the first step in this, what I was talking about with this situation in Dadaab, so one of the things I should clarify about Invenio is there's 20 people that work there, maybe 25, and we work in a million different places. I mean, not literally, but I mean, there's a lot of different places that we work. So obviously 20 people can't support all those places all the time. Like that's a very top-down approach. And so one of the things that Invenio does is they have these things called ICIPs, which is like Invenio Certified ICT Provider or something like that. Provider, I think, is the P. But anyway, these people are the people that do the real work. And they're the ones that, like, we help get them the knowledge and the know-how and the skill set, and they're able to, like, be on the ground at all times, and they're local, and they're typically technology companies that have already been there. And so particularly in this case in Dadaab, we were working with the telecom company Orange, and which is the second largest telecom company in Kenya. And so there are a lot of brilliant people that work there in technology that's been there for a long time. I mean, that have a lot of experience and a lot of Kenyan context. I mean, they're all from there. So, so one of the things that they didn't have a whole lot of kind of familiarity with was these small antennas that we use, and I'll kind of explain a little bit more about them with a diagram later. But so one of the things that we did that I helped with was training this group of people from different NGOs that are in Dadaab, as well as Orange employees, how to administer and set up these different networks. And so they're all ICT professionals, and so they're telecom professionals. And so so there's people from places like Kenya Red Cross, UNHCR, and just all kinds of different organizations. And then I also had one of the things is we try to stock a lot of we try to keep as much of the equipment that we use and the tools that we use. We want to keep that, like, we want to get stuff that's made in the place that we're working. And so since we do a lot of projects in Kenya, we actually have a warehouse that's in Nairobi, and that we will try to keep stocked for our ICIPs to be able to, if they need to use any of the stuff that they can. And then for our future projects that are in the area, we're able to use this warehouse and be able to not have to lug over a bunch of metal pieces of beams that we use to help mount these antennas that you see here. And so let me go to the diagram here. So this is the main thing in Dadaab. So I want to walk over. This is completely unorthodox. So we have the oh, this is fancy.
Don't look in it.
So I don't even need to be over there. It's awesome. Okay, so I just want to play with it now. So this tower over here, this is what I was talking about with Orange being able to provide internet access. So there's two main towers in Dadaab. One is owned by, or leased to Orange to be able to use, and then this guy is owned by UNHCR, and so so basically what happens is there'll be these sector antennas, and I'll go back to this picture. So these are called sectors, and those are called CPEs, the client premises equipment. So you would put this up at your particular, so if I'm at Red Cross Kenya, I would put this on some kind of mount or a mast and have it pointing towards the tower to be able to connect, to be able to make this connection right here to either one of these towers. So and one of the things that's also required with this is line of sight. So these antennas and sectors, they can reach 50 kilometers depending on the antenna, and they're not that big, and they're cost effective. I mean, the ones that we use probably about 20 kilometers, and the sectors were under $100 and the CPEs were under $100. That's pretty cool to be able to shoot internet from one place to another in a network that's that far away. And so to explain a little bit more about these two situations, there's another group that we worked with called NetHope, and they were the ones that kind of brought together these different NGOs into kind of just an affiliation, I suppose. They're kind of an umbrella group that facilitated the conversation between UNHCR, Red Cross Kenya, and CARE, and all the other people that we were working with. And so, so this is the network. This is called the collaboration network. So this is the one that they'll be able to send files back and forth amongst themselves with. And then this Orange network is the one, like Orange will provide, like we'll be able to get internet access to this tower, but like I mean, they would ask the question, I mean, and this is why a lot of telecom companies haven't put internet access in there, is like, is it worth the investment to build all the infrastructure to actually get these different NGOs internet access? And the answer is no. But with this wireless, you hear of ISP, internet service provider, people that use this technology is typically considered a WISP, wireless internet service provider. So this is essentially what Orange is doing, and so they're able to get the internet here, and then our job is to be able to set it up so that anyone that wants to use this internet will be able to connect to it, and wirelessly, and in a cost-effective manner. And so, and I should have mentioned also, there is internet access that's already there, provided by Safaricom, but it's unreliable and it's overpriced, and people are very unhappy with the service that's been there. So what Orange is wanting to do, and what we're helping them do, is to be a competitor / a backup to people. So if they have some high priority stuff that has to happen, they can have another alternative internet source that they can actually use this for a period of time, and be able to, whenever Safaricom goes back up, if they like that, they could use that, or vice versa. So, or they could use Safaricom as the backup. Because a lot of things happen that causes the internet to go down, and I mean, just while I was at Orange, I was able to go to the Orange headquarters in Nairobi, and it was really interesting just hearing the conversations that was in the elevator. It was like, oh, someone cut the fiber line, like. And then so everyone's internet was out, like for all, like on all the cell phones, like there's one line that got cut somewhere, and that seems to be a common thing that happens with the different telecom companies. So, which is one of the reasons why the reliability factor is there, and there's other reliability factors that were brought up to us, like monkeys hanging off and ripping down things. And so the other project was with TC21, and again, this was the thing that was in Mtwara and Zanzibar, and so we used Intel Classmate PCs for this particular setup, and so again, this was focused completely around schools, and similar to education, I mean, similar to the educational style CKCs that I spoke about a little bit earlier. But there's actually 4 different kinds of setups, and I'll go through them briefly. So the main components to these are the Classmate PCs, which students and administrative faculty will be able to use. And there, in some cases, there'll be a server, which is called an educational appliance. And it's made by a company called Critical Links out of Portugal. And then we also use Windows Multipoint for other reasons. And And so those are the main pieces. So I'll kind of go through those. That's a picture of the classmate PCs. These are actually really, they're pretty cool they're pretty cool PCs. They're kind of like I mean, you hear about the OLPC, sometimes the one laptop per child computer. This is more expensive, but it's more powerful, basically. They have dual core processors in them. They're pretty reliable, and people enjoy using them. I mean, they're normal. They run Windows 7 Professional. Like, it's a normal computer. It's just built so you can drop them. Like, and they're kid-proof to a degree. And so that's kind of a picture of what's going on. And also, USAID also likes to stamp everything that they do, if you see that. So yeah, they were also one of the key funders. So EMIS only. So EMIS is a piece of software that's used because a lot of these schools don't have a way to keep up with their student population. Like, they don't have things to record student grades. They don't have things to record attendance. They don't have things to record. I mean, they do, but it's personal. It's to them. It's on paper, and it's hard to get that to either the school at large, and really hard to get that to a regional level and then to a national level. And that's helpful into determining what things work in Tanzania. And so in this particular case, one of the setups just has 2 of these computers, and teachers are able to use these and be able to input these different the different logs that they have, and there's a database there that gets captured, and they're able to give that data to the server to be able to kind of link up regionally and then nationally. And then there's a fixed lab, and this is typically what will be used to kind of train teachers on how to use the software. People come into this lab, and since they hadn't had a lot of experience in a lot of cases in using the software, which, I mean, I had to be trained on it. I've never used it before. So the professors will come in and be able to learn how to use the application the way it was designed to do. And the applications that are available can, like, stream content, like, without using the internet. They use what's called multicasting on routers to be able to have simultaneous videos on every classmate. So if you have the teacher wants to play a video and every person in the class has a little laptop, they can just push play on theirs, and they have complete control over all the laptops that's going on, and they can all see the video at the same time. And so then there's the mobile lab, which so there's 2 classrooms with 20 classmate PCs, and then there's this does a similar thing, but also has but this doesn't have a server that's involved, and so they have you can take the laptops into the fixed lab from the mobile lab to be able to download the data onto a server to be able to upload that to a regional then national level, and that's the need for it to be mobile. And then in a similar case with the Bridge IT, and since I'm running out of time, I'm going to kind of go through. And so one of the other things that we did that I've done in my time was learning how to climb towers. That was exciting in a scary way. So one of the things that, like, that's one of the main things that was like, I love the academic world, and I've been in that for a while. And then, like, doing this was fantastic, and it was a huge learning experience. To be able to use pulleys, to be able to haul these big antennas up a tower, and if somebody gets knocked out on the tower, how do you get them down? And then, like, not wanting to be scared of being knocked out on the tower, like all kinds of different things. So, yeah, exactly. And so, yeah, if there's any questions, I'll be.
Actually, let's play his little video from Scott. Matt's got a video. Do you want to play that real fast?
Sure. It's just about the CKCs. Whoop. Got it.
And yes, Claire is speaking up.
Uh-oh. So this is a video Cisco put together, and they're a huge partner of ours for these CKCs, and we work with them a lot. It's kind of an overview.
I believe that giving access to information to the people is the only way that we're going to get them out of poverty. What I heard this morning from one of the community members, he said before the existence of this center, he didn't even have access to news of his own country. A CKC is a place where the local community can come and meet and use technology as a tool to help them better their lives. Education is something that is top priority for everybody here. They cannot necessarily afford it, but such a community-owned facility is quite subsidized, so they can actually come here and learn. Technology has been something that they embrace very easily because they know that is where the world is actually moving to. Cisco was a key player in bringing all the partners together, like Invenio and One Global Economy and Appleseed, creating an ecosystem of partners. One of our CKCs in Sega have been able to connect to other schools. They're connected to schools in Poland, they're connected to schools in Nairobi, and they have kids actually teaching each other different things like about culture, even things like math. They're learning from each other. Now they're connected. They're able to share best practices, and they're able to talk about what worked and what didn't.
We can exchange ideas with my friends. We just see a very big change in the community.
It doesn't matter where you are and what part of the world or what community or society you come from. As long as you have the internet, you have a voice. You have a platform where you can share. Once they have access to the internet and they have the right education, they are on the same par as anybody else across the world.
Yeah. So yeah, that was the feel-good video about CKCs, and that's a project that we did in Masai Mara, and the dab did not look like that. It was a desert, but yeah. So any questions that I can help with? Or?
I just have a question about the process in the camps of getting the internet to the camp. So was Invenio, were they hired by Orange to help them out with the process, or was it this consortium of NGOs? Like how, and what did you guys actually do? Did you guys figure out, okay, you're going to use this kind of technology, those things? Like,
yeah,
did you guys design that, or did you source it out?
Yeah.
Like, what was the...
Yeah, that's good. So what Invenio did, so we, it is kind of like two different projects in one, to a degree. And it just happened to be in the same location, so we worked it out to kind of do it simultaneously. And it is kind of related between this NetHope side and this Orange side. So what we did was, we're the experts with the, and I'm hopefully becoming one, but not quite there yet, but the experts with actually setting up the wireless infrastructure. So yes, we were the ones that did the design. Like that diagram was what we developed for them. And so we were basically helping them become their own WISP in this particular instance. And we also were the ones that helped train them to be able to, we actually did implement this with the people. This is, if you're doing telecom and this is your first WISP, we're not gonna like have one kind of academic, let me tell you kind of how to do this, and then good luck on the tower, like, and hopefully you get it right the first time. So we went out with them and helped them. Them being Orange and NetHope members, both of them. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a follow-up question to that. When you showed that diagram, it looked like you duplicated the entire infrastructure.
Yes.
Every site and then built a second, like, service tower. Why didn't you just piggyback off of these?
That's a good politics is why. So we have access to the UNHCR side for this particular NetHope project. These are, again, 2 different projects that were kind of linked. And so Orange, you don't want to connect their network. People are going to pay for Orange's service to have internet. NetHope members are being funded through NetHope. You don't have to pay to get on this collaboration network. So this is a cheap alternative to being able to have internet access outside so you can share files internally. So it's much more cost effective. And so that's essentially why there's 2 different networks, because they are completely separate. And you can be both a NetHope member and have a connection to this one particular sector, and you can be an Orange member that has internet access. But you have to pay monthly for that.
So if you were going to do this again, do you think there's a way you could have a software solution where you don't have to duplicate the hardware?
Yes, but with time constraints, that's really challenging. And so for this particular, I mean, I wasn't involved in the original design plan. I was more involved in the execution of this. And so as far as the exact what were the time constraints at the time that it was being made, I wasn't a part of that. So, but I would say that to me would be the most obvious barrier, because that takes a lot of time and money to create custom software.